Okay, so tonight we're starting a new series on the book of Iyov. So why are we doing Iyov? Ultimately, the goal is to, God willing, to learn all the prophets, all the books, all the scriptures, in the same way that we did the weekly parasha. So that is the bigger goal. We have already done quite a bit of it, including all of Tehillim, all of Psalms, every single pasuk. Iyov is actually a book that is very much not learned. Very few people have learned Iyov. It is a difficult book. Many of the words are difficult to comprehend. And a lot of people don't have an interest in this type of book, especially that it's all about difficulties, struggles that the life of Iyov is all about. A very, very painful life. They don't realize the valuable lessons, the important teachings of this book. So I chose Iyov because of the fundamental principles in Judaism that can be found in this book. It actually offers many of us some of the ideas, the concepts, and the answers to many questions that people may have had about life. There appears to be in many people's mind an impression that it's not fair. Life is not fair. And that is because of a lack of understanding and also because of our limited minds and how much can we comprehend the ways of God. So tonight is going to be an introduction. And B'ezrat Hashem, what we're going to be is not going through every pasuk, through every verse, instead more in general about every chapter. What is the theme of the chapter? What exactly is going on? What is the conversation about? What is the argument all about? Iyov is a very interesting individual. He has various friends who speak to him about his troubles, everyone trying to figure it out from a different angle. And as we will see, when we go through it, many of the ideas that philosophers struggled to understand, to figure out, are to be found in this book. And if we could point the most important idea of all of them, it's the principle of schar va'onesh, of reward and punishment. Very important principle in Judaism, that there is accountability for our actions. We are responsible for what we do or what we do not do. So this is of course something new to many people who are not familiar with Judaism. What do you mean reward and punishment? Do we see that people are rewarded for their good deeds? On the contrary, we see many people who are wicked, who are having a very good, comfortable life. So they don't understand how we can talk about something called reward and punishment. But in reality, we don't have to go to Sefer Iyov. Reward and punishment is to be found in the Torah. Those of us who learn Torah, when you go through Parshat Bechukotai, when you go through Parshat Kitavo, various parashiyot, various sections of the Torah, you will find there's quite a bit mentioned that there will be reward and there will be punishment for our deeds, the bad deeds. For the good deeds, there will be reward. And it's not so clear what the Torah had in mind as far as Olam Haba, because the Torah does not discuss the world to come. When we're talking about Olam Hazeh in this world, the Torah says, listen, if you cooperate, if you follow my laws, God says, then you will have rain on time, you will have prosperity, you won't have war. So it's clear to us that if we cooperate, Hashem says, I will also make it easy for you. So that's Olam Hazeh, that's this world. This is a world where we can see things. Did they come true or not? Is this true, what the Torah is promising or not? Olam Haba, the world to come, it's not something that is very clearly stated in the Torah. We have, of course, a tradition. We have emunah, we have faith. We do know, however, that the rabbis tell us that the real reward and the real compensation for our deeds is not in this world. It's really the world to come. That's really the main world. But here we would like to have a good life, a decent life. And Hashem says, yeah, I will remove illness. I will remove all the obstacles from having a difficult life. If you cooperate with me, I have laws in nature, Hashem says, that I've set in place, and if you follow my laws, then those laws will also be followed. If you don't follow my laws, then those laws will also not be observed. And that's just why we have tornadoes and hurricanes and earthquakes for a variety of reasons. But the common denominator is what? Something is wrong. Human beings, not just Jews, human beings are not cooperating, they're not behaving. So Hashem has to send us a signal. It's not just about punishment. It's not just about reward and punishment. It's also signals from above. Hashem communicates with us in various ways. So the rabbis tell us, for the most part, there's no reward for a mitzvah, for a good deed in this world. Where is the reward reserved for? Olam haba. In that, you have to trust Hashem. But what about this world? In this world, you will have something called the fruits, perot, the fruits of the mitzvah, especially certain mitzvot. Honoring one's parents, the Torah says, your life will be lengthened. Giving charity, you will be protected. There are certain mitzvot that even in this world we gain a lot from. We don't have to wait for the world to come after we leave this world. Even though that is the main place where we will be rewarded. Nonetheless, in this world, there is something called fruits. Some benefit of our good actions, our good deeds. Okay, if that's the case, it's easy. If we are able to see certain things in this world, then okay, we will see. Are we doing the right thing or are we doing the wrong thing? Where does the difficulty begin? The difficulty begins when we see contradictions. And that's really what the essence of this book is all about. Man sees contradictions. The righteous, the people who are doing the right thing, are suffering. And the evil people, they're having it easy. And their weakness says, that's when the trouble begins. That's when people really cannot understand God's ways. Does God exist? Is God around? How could He let these things happen? There appears to be no order. There appears to be a contradiction to what the Torah is saying. So one more time, if things are observable, we should be able to see it in this world. And certain things are, the Torah says, observable. So what's the problem? The problem is when there's a contradiction. When what we think should be good, it should be peaceful, does not seem to work out for some people who have a very challenging life. Whereas for others who we think, we believe, based on what the Torah says, they will not have it good, they're having it good. And that's the topic called Tzaddik Veralo, Rasha V'Tovlo. Famous topic of why is it that the tzaddik can sometimes have a difficult life, the tzaddik, the righteous man, and the Rasha, the wicked, can have tov, can have it good. Famous topic that great scholars, Jewish rabbis, have had a hard time with it. We don't even have to talk about the rabbis. Moshe Rabbeinu had a problem with this. He asked Hashem, please, can you explain to me your ways? Hodi'eni na'e derachecha, if you recall that verse. Hashem, please, let me know your ways. I'd like to know how you manage this world. How do you do it? What are the rules? I don't understand what's going on. And the reason why this is significant is because, God forbid, if people see contradictions, this causes them to have doubts in their emunah, in their faith. Imagine a Holocaust survivor. He just saw most of his family killed, and they were good people. They gave charity, and they prayed every day, and they were devoted to God. And why do they deserve something like that? So you see how people can really be distraught. People can really have sfekot, doubts in their emunah. So as a result of all these contradictions, what appear to be contradictions, many doubts arose throughout history. One of them is, what is mazal? People talk about mazal. Maybe it's mazal, destiny, fate, that controls everything. You're born at a certain hour and that's it. You will have a certain mazal, qismat in Farsi. That's it, your destiny, your fate. Or, as it's called in Hebrew, goral. That is the fate. That's the goral of certain people, they're born at a certain time. And this is a whole science in itself, astrology. Goes back many, many years. The Jews and non-Jews alike were informed of it. They knew about this. There was something like that. The stars do have influence, and I have many lectures about that. But how do you explain it? Is this from Shemayim? Is this from the Mazal? Does it depend on when a person is born? If it does depend on when he's born, then what about his Maasim, his deeds? Can he change the Mazal? Or is he stuck with it? So even if he's a good person, if he has a bad Mazal, that's it? Or if he's a bad person, but he has a good Mazal, that's it? He's going to have a good Mazal the whole life? So all of these topics, Mazal, Goral, and the topic of Bechira Chofshit, of free will, needs to be further explained, clarified. Free will? Do we have free will? Or do we have Mazal? Or what does it depend on? Can we actually choose, or does Hashem determine everything from before? Predetermination, predestination. What is it? Which one is it? All of these concepts, you should know, were discussed a lot by philosophers, especially the Greek philosophers, throughout the ages. Rabbis talk about it. And that's what really the book of Iyov is all about, is trying to figure out, what is it? Which one is it? Iyov believes himself to be a righteous man. He didn't do anything wrong. And once we go through the book, you'll be amazed what happened to him. And it's really incredible. Unless you read it from the beginning till the end, you don't really know what is the divine plan over here. What's going on? So, this Iyov, who was he? We're talking after all about a certain individual. So there's many opinions as to what era, what time period in history did he live, and who wrote this book. Our tradition is Moshe Rabbeinu wrote the book. He had some of the questions that are talked about, that are discussed in this book, and he decided that this is a very important book to write, to put it together, where these issues are discussed for people whose emunah is a little weak. Let them understand what the Torah has to say, and let them not in any way have these contradictions or these doubts in their faith as a result of not having the knowledge. See, once you have the knowledge, the Torah knowledge, then a lot of this makes a little bit more sense. A little bit more sense. So some say he lived during the time of Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. Some say that he lived during the days of Moshe Rabbeinu. Some say that he lived during the time of David. Some say that he came back with the Jews from Babylonia when he came back to Israel. Some say there was never such an individual called Iyov. It's all a mashal. It's all a parable. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu put together this piece, right, with this individual who suffered a lot, very wealthy at one time, everything taken away from him, his wealth and his family. In the end, he got everything back. And so it's all a mashal. Obviously, our tradition is that this is not a mashal, this was a real person. And perhaps the mashal part is also true. This book is used as a mashal, as an example for others to see this type of circumstances exist. People have had this kind of a life, and if you want to have a little bit of understanding why certain things happen, bad things to good people, learn this book. And by the way, there's nothing bad. We tend to call it bad, but the Rabbi Chafetz Chaim used to say, never say it's bad. It's bitter. Maybe it's bitter. You know, you take medicine, it could be bitter, but it's bad. It's good for you. So, Judaism teaches us many concepts. And one of them is, or from above, nothing bad comes down. On the contrary, if you look at the very beginning of Bereshit, what will you find? Hashem says, after everything that He created, it's Tov. Why is He telling us Tov? He's telling us that it's good. Hashem made it. Yes, Hashem made everything purposeful. When He says Tov, it means it's purposeful. It serves a purpose. It's good. It's complete. Hashem made it. So Tov is purposeful. So even pain and suffering serves a purpose. Is it good? Yes, it serves a purpose. According to our tradition, Iyov lived for 210 years. That's a long time. And part of the reason could be because Hashem wanted to repay him for all the pain that he had, and He gave him many more years to enjoy the good in this world as well. This 210 years, according to one opinion, was from the time the Jewish people went down to Egypt until the time they came out of Egypt. This is, again, just one opinion. So Moshe Rabbeinu had many questions about Hashem. He's a human being, and he's curious. He doesn't understand. He's a prophet. He knows a lot more than the average person, but even he wanted to know certain things. So what's the best way to deal with questions? If it's not possible to know everything there is, the best way to deal with all these questions and doubts is called emunah, is faith. We believe. We are told something, we believe. Now certain things we don't only believe, we actually know for a fact. We know for a fact Hashem created the world. That's a fact. We know it. We're convinced of that. Certain things we don't know for a fact, but we believe. A good example of that would be Tchiyat HaMetim. The dead will rise. Do we know it as a fact? No, we don't see it. The creation we know as a fact because we have testimony from our forefathers who heard Hashem's voice in Har Sinai. The world is so designed that it makes sense that it has a creator. So there's a certain degree of common sense that this world is created. But there are certain things that we don't know for sure, but that's part of our faith. So when we're dealing with difficult questions, as the book of Iyov does, we have to remember that the easiest way to deal with them is as our forefathers have always dealt with difficult issues. Emunah, faith. The Chazon Ish, the great Rabbi Chazon Ish, who passed away in the 1950s, met up with many Holocaust survivors. And they asked him many, many questions. And they wanted to know, how do you deal with this faith? With faith alone? It's not easy. We saw so many terrible tragedies, just faith alone. So he says like this, those who have faith do not have questions. Those that don't have faith, there are no answers for them. No matter what you say to those people who have no faith, it will not be sufficient. Those that have faith, they don't have any questions. I mean, they're pained, they feel lost, they're hurt, but if they have true, strong faith, they don't have questions. So you ask, what just happened in the Holocaust? Hashem knows why. We don't have to figure this out. It pains us, it's a tremendous loss, it's a tremendous tragedy. There's definitely a reason for it. And one of these days we'll know the reason. There's a beautiful mashal by the Chazon Ish that I discussed in the past, how somebody came complaining to him, how he lost his entire family. Rabbi, how do you explain this? Where was God? And he says, let me tell you a mashal, an example. There was somebody that brought some very expensive wool to the tailor. He wanted to have a suit made. And the tailor told him, come back in 2 weeks, it will be ready. So this man was curious after 3 days to see what was going on. So he goes to the tailor and he sees that the tailor took the entire roll of wool and cut it up in pieces. And he felt terrible. He says, what did you do to my beautiful wool? It's expensive wool, you tore it into pieces. Sir, I told you to come back in 2 weeks from now. You will see a beautiful suit. Now you're seeing just the pieces. You're not seeing the whole entire suit. You will see what I've made with all these pieces when you come back in 2 weeks. So the Chazon Ish tells this individual, what you just saw in Europe are pieces. Many, many pieces. Come back when Mashiach arrives and you will see what Hashem made with all these pieces. The beautiful suit that came out of all this. We don't live long enough to see why Hashem does certain things. We just see the pieces. You see 1 frame, 2 frames of a long movie that's going to be 6,000 years. And we expect to understand everything. Come back and you will see what this was all about. David HaMelech also had a very difficult life. If you read Tehillim, you'll see. And in one verse it says, Im lo shiviti v'domamti nafshi ki gamul alei imo. It says, I'm telling you, David HaMelech says, I swear to you, that I was silent. I was silent like a little baby nursing from its mother. It's in peace and in tranquility, in the proximity of its mother. He doesn't cry. He doesn't ask questions. It feels good. He says, so was I, even though I was going through a lot of pain, he says, persecuted, struggling, so many problems that he had with his own children, some of his own children. He says, I kept quiet because I realized that this is all from Hashem. So I was like a little baby. Was in describing his emunah, his faith. He was sincere, like a little baby is quiet and sincere. He doesn't. He's not troubled by anything. He's next to his mother. That is why emunah and bitachon, faith and reliance in Hashem, trust in Hashem is so important. A lot of people believe God created the world, they have emunah, but they don't have enough bitachon, trust in Him. The trust is a whole different level of faith. It takes time to develop, to learn about it. Why certain things happen we may not know, but trust in Him that it's for some ultimate good. We see this example when somebody passes away or something terrible happens. There's a blessing that we say. What's the blessing? Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. Blessed be the true judge. The true judge. He judges with truth. This is for real. There's no corruption. He's pure. He is just. He's right. We make such a blessing in the moment of some tragedy that we can't figure it out. It's painful. We still make that blessing to reinforce that faith, that emunah, temimah, pure faith, that we have no doubts and no questions that it's all for the good. There was once two Jews that came to the rabbi, Rabbi Yitzchak of Berditchev. And they were very, very disappointed. They were in pain. They were having a hard time. And they wanted the rabbi to give them some encouragement, perhaps a blessing. So the rabbi realized that these two individuals were not so strong in their faith, and he tells them, tell me, what would you do differently from God? If you were able to create a world, if you were able to make some change, what would it be? So one of them says, I would make rich and poor everybody the same. Everybody would have, there'd be no rich, no poor, everybody the same. And the other one says, I would get rid of all the wars and I would only allow for there to be peace. So the rabbi turns to them and says, and you know what I would do? I would do exactly what God did. Whatever He did is the right thing, is the good thing. Who are we to try to figure out how to make things different? The way Hashem made the world, that's the way it's supposed to be. That's it. So what's the problem? The problem is with us. But we don't have enough knowledge. We don't have enough understanding to figure these out. And we think that it would be better if we can change it. But He knows best. The Chafetz Chaim says the following about the Pasuk, Mishpatei Hashem emet tzadeku yachdav. The laws of Hashem are emet, are true. Tzadeku yachdav. They are just together. Together meaning all of them. But the rabbi emphasizes here that the word yachdav is teaching us a very important lesson. When do we realize that the mishpatim of Hashem, that the laws of Hashem are true? When we are able to gather all the facts, yachdav. When you put everything like a puzzle, when you put all the pieces together, then you see the picture. When will we realize that the mishpatim of Hashem throughout history is the truth? It's what we deserve. It's what should have been. It's when they are yachad, when they are together, when we'll be able to get all the pieces together. Like I just told you with the tailor. Pieces, yeah, put them all together and you'll see a beautiful suit. There's a lot of pieces all over history. Expulsions, persecutions, blood libels, inquisitions, crusades. People suffered. Jews and non-Jews, we can't understand what's going on. We always see pieces. Yachdav, when will you know that this is the truth, the mishpatim of Hashem are true? When you put all the pieces together. The central question of the book that we'll be learning, Sefer Iyov, the central question is really, if we can narrow it down to one question, is there hashgacha from Hashem in this world? That's the central question. Is there God's supervision in this world? Is there something called divine providence? Does he look after our affairs? Does he care bichlal? Is he interested to know what's going on over here? Or perhaps he's just a God that creates the world and then leaves. He left it, perhaps he created and left, and everything is hefker. Hefker means free for all. Anybody can do whatever he wants, and he's not accountable. Nobody will tell him what to do. Of course, unless you have police and you have armies and all that, then you have some sort of order. But other than that, God is not interested in this world. Could you believe there was actually a philosophy like that? There still is. God created the world? Of course he created. It's obvious, you can see. There's no just Big Bang and things happening by themselves, and for sure not evolution. Who did this? A designer. You can see, it's common sense. But he's not around anymore. We don't see him anymore. How do you know he's not around? Look, terrible things happening. People getting killed. I'm talking about today too, in the United States. All these terrible things in the schools, people, kids being shot. What did the kids do? Innocent, right? To us at least, it appears to be innocent victims. Where's God? How could he allow things like that to happen? So that's really the central question of the entire book of Iyov. Is there something called Hashgacha? Can you prove to me that God is Mashgiach, that he oversees, that he supervises what's going down here, what's going on here in this world? And if he is involved, how much is he involved? Every day, every moment, once a year? To what extent does he intercede? That's the biggest question of all. That's the central question of the book. And that's, of course, the topic that many philosophers discuss. Is there a God that is involved in this world? Because many of them believe that he created the world. But that's how far they went. We don't see that he's involved. Prove it to me. Now, Judaism has no problem with that. Everything is about Hashgacha. All you got to do is learn Torah. So we have an advantage. We have the Torah. The Torah spells it out very clearly. Hashem is involved in your day-to-day life. You may not see it immediately. It may take a little bit of time. Eventually you will. But philosophers had a problem with understanding to what degree is there, if there is Hashgacha, and free will. Free will sounds beautiful. Men are not robots. Human beings are not robots. If that's the case, that we have free will, can we do anything we want? Or is that free will limited in any way? And if there is something called Mazal, can we change it, even if there is Mazal? Because they believed that there was something called Mazal. So, the simple answer to all of this is man in his limited mind cannot figure everything out on his own. You can be the smartest, the most intelligent philosopher. To try to figure this all out on your own, you may be able to figure out certain things, but not everything. You will never be able to have all the answers to all the questions. Why not? Ask a scientist, why can't he figure everything out? Well, he says, well, give me enough time and I will. That's arrogance. Sincere scientist who seeks the truth will hopefully tell you we're too limited in our knowledge, in our mind, to figure everything out. It's not possible for us to know everything. We don't even know everything about the human body. The human body. You expect us to know everything about the stars and the galaxies, some of which we cannot even see. So, as it is in general, man cannot know everything there is to know. He doesn't have the answers to all the questions. Even though these are very good questions. Is there Mazal? Can you change the Mazal? How much free will there is? No. But the most difficult part of all of this, which is again, the book of Iyov has a lot to do with, is pain and suffering. So the question is how much Hashgacha there is, of course, but it has to do with the fact that a lot of people suffer, get sick, struggle, and that bothers people much more than the other question, why is this evil guy being rewarded? That's a question too, right? Why is this evil man doing so well? That bothers us, but what bothers even more is why the righteous are suffering. So you see how this question, the one that involves pain, is the most difficult of all. Because if you say Hashem is involved, Hashem is Mashgiach, where is He? How can He allow this to happen? He's a tzaddik. And didn't you say in the Torah that if you follow my mitzvot, everything will be okay? You see how all of a sudden doubts, contradictions, what's going on over here? So we spoke about philosophers, but even in Islam, going back years, there was various schools of thought. There was a school of thought of Qadar and one of Jabr. Basically, it's one of the differences, by the way, between Sunni and Shiite Islam. One of them held that there is something called predestination, governed by God, established by God, but with some degree of free will. The other one believed you can't change it. That's the way it is. It's set in stone. There's nothing that you can do about it. Basically eliminating free will. There's a lot of different opinions in between those two. But they never really reached a clear conclusion as to how much free will there is, if there is free will. There was always this discussion left in the open. They don't have a clear answer. Why don't they have a clear answer? Because they don't have the Torah min Hashamayim. They don't have what we have, the Torah given to us from Shemayim. And it's very clear. The rabbis explain to us, even though it's not written in the Torah, in those words, the rabbis explain to us, Hakol bidei Shamayim, chutz mirat Shamayim. So if you want a clear, short answer to how much free will there is and how much is predetermined from before, predestined, Hakol bidei Shamayim, for the most part things have been predestined from before, but Yirat Shamayim, the fear of heaven, is in your hands. In other words, when it comes to observing a mitzvah or not observing it, committing a wrong or not committing it, that's where you have free will. But who you will marry, how much money you will make, where you will live, that's Bidei Shamayim. It appears to you and you think that you're making the move and the decision. And we'll talk about that soon. Appearances, yeah. For appearance's sake, it will appear to be that you are involved in every decision. You looked into that piece of real estate before you bought it. You went and got that loan. You went and did that. And you forget. You didn't do anything. It was Bidei Shamayim. What was your choice? Did you get up in the morning and go to shul to pray? Did you give the man charity when he asked you for some money? That's up to you completely. Mitzvot, good deeds. Did you hold yourself back from being angry? That's free will. But all kinds of things that relate to your livelihood, to your marriage, children, that you don't have too much control. A little bit control you have, of course, to what school you send them and so forth, but a lot of this is from above. So we have a little bit of a understanding how much is in our hands and how much is not in our hands. Once you learn Kabbalah, you will finally be introduced to a concept that many great rabbis did not even talk about before. And that's Gilgul, reincarnation. Once you learn the Zohar and you are introduced, you are exposed to the concept of reincarnation, wow, that opens many doors and that solves many problems. Many questions are answered, are resolved with the topic of reincarnation. Not everybody knew about this until the Kabbalah became public. It wasn't public in the beginning, it was private. It's the mysticism in Judaism that was not for just anyone to learn. So once you know about that, that helps with a lot of areas in life. But even if you know a lot, even if you learned a lot, you will discover that Rav Hanistar ala Galui, there is much more concealed than there is revealed. The Kabbalah tells us, look at the oceans of the world. How come there's more water than continents, than Earth? 2/3 of the globe is water. Who needs so much water? Some countries would like to have more room to build. We only have 1/3 land, a land mass. 2/3 is water. So the Kabbalah gives one explanation for it. It's to remind you that there's a lot more concealment than that which is revealed. The human being, even though he's endowed with a mind, Hashem wants him to know certain things, to figure certain things, not to be complete ignoramus. He should know there's a lot more concealed. The oceans conceal a lot more concealed than revealed. That's the way it needs to be. But why? Why not reveal everything? Why does Hashem want to conceal so much? He conceals himself too. And the answer is very simple. Hashem wants to enable us to have free will. And if he would make things clear and black and white, then that would eliminate free will. Everything would be obvious. Everybody would most likely do the right thing and stay away from the wrong thing. If they saw that for the right thing you're compensated and for the bad thing you're punished, it's like a child learning the hard way, right? Putting his finger in the electrical socket or touching something hot. He realizes very quickly that this is not a good idea. Some people don't learn from their mistakes, but people, if they would see it time after time that what they're doing is no good, has bad results, they would stop doing it. So Hashem does not want things to be too clear because that would interfere with our free will. I always use this as an example to explain to the scientists who are so adamant, insisting on, we want proof if you claim that God created the world. Only scientific proof. Without that, you can't convince us. It's impossible to give you scientific, clear proof, because that would defeat the whole purpose of why Hashem made the world this way, that He is concealed, that He allows people to not believe in Him, that He allows people to come up with all kinds of explanations that are contrary to our Torah. He wants it to be free will. Let people believe whatever they want. And you will have occasionally somebody like Abraham Avinu, who grew up in a house of idolatry, the exact opposite, and came to his own understanding. And it's not because of his IQ, it's because he uses common sense. And we just had someone like that who passed away a little over a week ago, Uri Zohar, who for the first 41 years of his life was very secular, atheists. He was very popular in Israel. He was a movie star and well-liked, very talented person. I knew him personally. And all of a sudden, after 41, he changed directions. He became very observant, religious, a believer in God. There's a whole story behind it. And I have a lecture of him on YouTube, which I translated from Hebrew to English, if you want to see it. It's fascinating how a man who was on the other side completely did not believe it, his father didn't believe it, his grandfather didn't believe it. This is an Ashkenazi Jew, not Sephardic. The Sephardic Jews, sometimes they remember their father or grandfather was somewhat religious. He went to synagogue to pray, but these are European, Polish, Russian Jews who don't recall anything sometimes. And he changed his way from one end to another. And he says, the way it happened, what triggered it is that he saw the truth. It made sense to him. And he was upset. Why did they deprive me of all this information? They didn't teach it to me in school. I have to figure this out all on my own. So someone who's truthful, he's really truthful, he doesn't care what the truth is, even if it means he has to change his life, he will find the truth. The best proof is Uri Zohar. Completely on the other hand, does not want to believe, does not care about it, makes fun of it. How does he become a Baal Teshuvah? How does he return? He's interested in the truth wherever it leads. And it upsets him, it pained him that he wasn't taught all this. Now, for the next 45 years of his life, he became a great rabbi. And he helped other people do teshuvah as well. Other people repented because of him. He accomplished a lot. So, if he can do it, anybody can do it. Hashem doesn't want to make it too obvious. Do it on your own. So, to many people in the past, it was obvious that God created the world. You don't have to be Jewish. I mean, scientists like Galileo Galilei, Isaac Newton, there's a lot of famous people. To them it was clear, it was obvious. They used common sense. But the problem was with this philosophy that was very, very prominent. Okay, God created the world. Where is He? Did He abandon the world? How does He let these things happen? That's what this book talks about. Intelligent people discussing with Eov and trying to figure out why is he going through such great difficulty. Does he not get involved, God, in this world? Is the world just functioning by itself ever since it was created? However, if you look closely to the world, if you analyze it carefully, like Avraham Avinu, use your common sense, what will you notice? One of the first things you will notice is that, wait a minute, there's design here. There are certain laws of physics that are always working for the most part. Certain rules. There must be some plan. Did you ever just see somebody build a skyscraper just for fun? So much detail goes into it. Why would he want to do that? He has a purpose. He has a goal here. So the world is a lot more complicated than a skyscraper. So what is this all about? So if you pay close attention, you will see that there's design and purpose. Once you understand that there's some purpose, some design, you will identify with something called the anthropic principle. The anthropic principle states more or less that life has the conditions to make it possible. In other words, we as observers can tell that the world is created for us. In order for us to live, in order for us, human beings, to survive, there needs to be certain conditions. A certain amount of air, oxygen, right? A certain amount of sun, water. We see that life, the earth, has those requirements to make life a possibility. So this principle basically says, in an indirect way, that means that it was created. That Hashem made it in such a way that people can live and survive. That the conditions are just right, perfect. The earth is not too far from the sun and not too close to the sun. Otherwise it wouldn't be possible. So if you analyze all the little details about life, it's wow. Hashem made it exactly in such a way to enable life to exist. So, in the same way, Judaism teaches that the human being is endowed with enough sechel, enough of a mind, to be able to comprehend certain things. The problem is, one of the problems is that he forgets. He can't know everything. He might think, oh, I've learned so much, I know so much, I should be able to figure it all out. No, you have to be careful. As intelligent as you may be, as knowledgeable as one may be, he's still limited. A cat. Take a cat. Can you teach a cat to be a plumber, mechanic? You can train it to do certain things. The mind of an animal is limited. The human being doesn't realize that he's limited too. He just knows that he's smarter than the animal. That's true. But you are also limited. Your eyes, you don't have eyes of an eagle. You can't run as fast as an antelope. You're not as strong as a gorilla. Right? I mean, you're limited. Your neshama, your soul, is your real essence, not your physical body. Well, we don't see the soul. Yeah, but you can detect it. There are ways to see it, to detect it. But the physical body is limited. The neshama is much more powerful. The neshama has great potential of accomplishment. But even so, it's closed in the physical body, in the physical world. It has certain limitations. It has to follow the limitations of the physical world, even though in some ways it's not limited as a soul, as a spirit. It doesn't have those boundaries that the physical world has. So here we have a human being who has some degree of sechel, And that sechel, that mind, that intelligence, if he's properly educated, he will be able to figure out all kinds of things. Enough of what Hashem wants him to know. What is that? That I'm here, I'm involved, and you can turn to me and actually pray to me. That's very interesting, a very important piece of information. You can turn to him and pray to him. So I just told you something very important. Not only is God involved according to Judaism, not only does he know what's going on, is he aware of everything, you can actually turn to him and pray to him. And he wants you to do that. He wants you to be connected to him. And he gives you the chance, the abilities to do teshuvah, to repent. God is forgiving. What do we know this from? From the Torah. People are confused, nonetheless, even though they're intelligent and they see that perhaps God is involved, because of the hester, the concealment. They can't figure everything out. It doesn't make sense to them, but deep down they realize he exists. Through the Torah that we have, we know a lot better. We know the man is responsible for his actions, and even though we don't see immediate consequences, it doesn't mean anything. It means that there could be, at some other time, that God will punish this individual for what he did, and if not in this world, then in the world to come. It is the Torah that reveals to us much of what we don't know. This Torah makes a distinction between Tov and Ra, good and evil. For the Jew, there is a distinction also, a difference between Tum'ah and Tahara, purity and impurity. There is a distinction, a difference between something which is kosher and not kosher. Not for the rest of the world. So it's the Torah that reveals to us, this is good for you, this is not good for you. Don't do this. Why not? I don't see anything wrong with it. Because you don't know. Hashem made this world. He knows exactly what's good and what's not good. Trust him. Listen to him. Torah teaches us that there are different kinds of laws. Laws between us and Hashem, and laws between us and our fellow Jew, or fellow, or non-Jew. Makes no difference. There are certain laws. And there definitely is a connection between this world and the upper world. Hashem, when he's involved with the entire world as a whole, and with individuals. Because you might say, okay, God is involved in this world, but perhaps only with a country, with a nation, with an empire. With every individual, he knows what my needs are. Yeah, Judaism teaches that Hashem is aware of everything. He takes care of even lice. He makes sure they have food to eat. Lice, small little lice. He takes care of everything from the smallest to the biggest. So Hashem is involved not only with the whole, but even with the particulars, with the individuals. And in this creation, you will notice that Hashem's involvement comes about through Din and through Rachamim. When you learn Kabbalah, you learn about the various sefirot, the various attributes of God, of how he is involved in this world. But the main ones are Din and Rachamim, justice and mercy. Mercy is generous. Mercy is flexible, forgiving. Justice is justice. It has to be this way. The rule is the rule, the law is the law. But Hashem uses both. And sometimes he implements the rule, and sometimes he's forgiving, he's merciful. What do we see that? All we see is contradictions. We don't understand what's going on here. Maybe now it's Din. Maybe the other day was Rachamim. From the Torah we learn these things. Otherwise, how do you figure this out on your own? In Judaism, you come across a concept called midah keneged midah, measure for measure. You've heard of that, right? Measure for measure. God forbid somebody does something wrong, it may come back to haunt him. He may get hurt as a result, in the exact same way that he perpetrated against somebody else. And then what we see that strengthens our faith even more, that there is a connection, a constant connection between God and this world, is very simple. It's through the means called Nevuah, prophecy, Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, and a dream, a real dream. God not only is involved, not only can you turn to him and pray to him, he communicates with us. And not only through signs in the world, through a dream sometimes. Some dreams are true. Otherwise, it's very difficult to explain. Somebody who passed away coming in a dream and telling you, I know you're looking for this piece of paper, it's over there, All kinds of dreams that can be proven to be real dreams. There is life after death. Otherwise, how's this person coming back in a dream and telling you something if he's gone forever? He was cremated, God forbid, hopefully not. Right? We're against cremation. There's a connection. God is connected, and He connected to the Jewish people through prophets at one time. And even these days, through Ruach HaKodesh, divine inspiration, He reveals Himself, some of Himself, or His message through these means of communication. So you see, we in our Torah have a sufficient evidence that HaKadosh Baruch Hu communicates, is involved with humanity, but especially with the Jewish people, especially with the land of Israel. And that is why He wanted us to build a Bet HaMikdash. What's the idea of building a temple? Is to remind everyone that His presence is amongst us, the Shekhinah is amongst us. So before we actually begin to learn the book inside, chapter by chapter, I tell people that if they want to understand Iyov, it would help if they first understood a little bit why Abraham Avinu went through nisyonot, tests. That's something even the child knows who goes to school. Abraham was tested by God many times. Why does God need to test him? Hashem knows who we are. He reads our mind. He knows our intentions. He knows exactly what we're all about. He needs to test. Usually when you test someone, it's because you're unsure about him. What's the purpose of a test? So once we understand the tests that Abraham Avinu went through, we understand the tests of what the Jewish people went through in the desert. For 40 years, they were tested. Hashem is testing them. They got upset. God, where's the water? We're thirsty. Where's the food? Why is it so difficult? They were tested, and they did not always respond very well. But why did Hashem do this to begin with? But if you go back to the beginning of creation, what did we say before? Everything is good. Akol tov. Even a test serves a purpose. Everything Hashem does is for some ultimate good. You see that from the very beginning of the creation. That's the blueprint. But we don't see it that way. We think, oh, it's terrible. In your eyes, perhaps. You don't have strong enough glasses to make out all the fine detail. My favorite example is, imagine you're behind a very, very solid door that has a glass that you can see through. And what do you see inside that other room? You can't hear what's going on, but you can see. You see somebody with a white gown cutting off a leg of somebody who's screaming and struggling. And you may think, this is terrible. How could he be so cruel to cut off a leg to this individual? But just wait till the door opens up and the patient thanks the doctor for saving his life because that leg had gangrene, infected. And if he would not have cut off that piece, he would have died. We don't see that. We don't know what's going on. We don't hear anything. We see something that doesn't make sense to us. It's cruel. And then he says, thank God, thank the doctor for what he did. He saved my life. That's all it is. It's ignorance on our part. People react when they're in pain. I have no mazal. That's degoral. Lost case. All kinds of expressions that have no foundation. They don't realize that Hashem is involved in everything that goes on, but it takes a little bit of studying. The book of Iyov offers a little bit of a window into that area of struggle, of pain and suffering, and what are the possible explanations. But I'm just warning you right now, just because there's various explanations, don't think they're all real. Don't think that they're all true. It is the very, very, very end of the book that provides us with the real answer that Hashem gives Himself. Even though there's some truth in everything that's being said, but what's the real answer? You will never know. Hashem says, you will never know. You will never be able to figure me out. Since when do you expect to know everything about this world? You live so few years. Your mind is limited. How much can you know? You expect to have all the answers? I thought today, as I was preparing the lecture, of a mashal that I think is very apropos today that we did not have years ago. And I think this is a good way to conclude tonight's lecture. Today we know what it means to have a car that drives itself, right? You've heard about cars that drive by themselves. They have a built-in GPS and all kinds of sensors. It's incredible. They have airplanes like that too. Imagine somebody did not know about this. He enters the car, he's going on a drive, and he has control over the wheel and the brakes. But he doesn't realize what's happening in the background. In reality, the car is really driving itself to wherever it needs to. He, behind the wheels, in the comfort of this car, thinks that he's doing everything. All of a sudden, the car stops by itself because had it not stopped, it would have crashed into somebody or something. Oh, and he says, oh, thank God, I was able to stop on time. He doesn't realize that it was the sensors that were causing the car to stop. He thinks that he put the foot on the brake. He thinks that he moved the steering wheel, which he did. But it wasn't you who did all of this. It was all the technology in the car, the GPS, that was driving you in the path that you needed to go on this journey called life, to avoid certain pitfalls, not make certain mistakes. So it appears to you that you're doing it, yes, but that's the whole idea, is to conceal who really is behind all of this, and that's Hashem. Who's the one that saved your life? Who's the one that did all of this for you? Think about your entire life, look back, and you will see there's somebody upstairs who is also downstairs, who's involved behind the scenes. And the only thing that we need to do is to read the manual of instructions. That's all it is. We have a manual of instructions called the Torah that helps us figure out a little bit more, gain a little bit more clarity into what this life is all about.